Welcome back for another Union Arena video, and today we're going to be talking about the top 32 archetypes that placed at the Dallas Regional that happened just this past weekend. But before I dive into that, I want to give a very special shout out, honestly, to all the players who came out to the event. We had almost 400 players for this regional, which is a massive improvement from Gen Con. And I know Gen Con, again, the Sunday and convention stuff and what have you, makes it a little bit harder to get to, but people showed up, and we had an absolute blast getting to cast some games of Union Arena and also just looking at what the field had overall. At one point, as I was just walking the top tables, there was an Integrity Knights deck at 4-0, which, spoiler, we're going to talk about as well, and just was really fun to see a lot of the brews overall. So, again, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the top placing deck of each archetype, showcasing where they fell in the list, and just some quick thoughts overall on the decks and how they fit into the meta and all that good stuff. But without further ado, let's dive in. So here we have it, the top 32 breakdown. I've posted this on Twitter and Facebook and all the places first, but the one thing I do have to acknowledge up front is that when we think about what decks made up the most of the meta, and unfortunately we didn't have the total breakdown, but just as someone who was walking around at both, was at round 5 technically and then round 9, I really got to see what was being played at the top tables or was just consistently doing well. And maybe to the surprise of nobody, Mustang, Lancelot, and Squad Zero were the top 3 most represented decks, at least from my own personal viewing experience. We'd have to have the full metadata, of course, just to absolutely verify. There might have been like another one that was very close because there was a lot of blue JJK, but overall I feel fairly confident saying that those were the 3 most common decks. Now, the other thing that's really neat about this is that in our top 8, as you'll see as we go through each of the lists, we had 6 different archetypes that made the top 8 placement, which was really cool to see. So coming out of Gen Con, I know there was a lot of concern about, oh, it's all Mustang or, oh, it's all Squad Zero. But I think now that we had a bigger regional, which is honestly what we kind of needed and we're waiting for, we got to see more of these decks kind of have their time in the spotlight, and also just go to show that there's a lot of deck diversity, archetype diversity, and playstyle diversity that goes into this, that it's not just, oh, the Mustang show or, oh, the Lancelot show. I will say, I did expect a few more Lancelot. Honestly, if there's like one thing that sticks out between this entire chart to me is that based on the number of Lancelots that I saw, especially doing well at the very end, I was quite surprised that some of these, didn't quite make it all the way. Maybe a few more bubbled out at the X2 that we're going to cover today. And maybe that's why they would have been like 33, 34, what have you. But I think that's the only one that like really jumps out at me. Everything else on here, we've talked about multiple times on this channel and saying like, look, these are solid decks that you can play into the meta and do well. And shocker, everything is here that we expected. Again, the only other one that might really jump out at people is going to be the Integrity Knights, because it's one that I think has not been on a lot of people's radars, and it does require a little bit of setup and requires you to have certain pieces at the right time. A lot like the new Hunter x Hunter yellow deck, which we'll talk about in our next video when I get time to record and feel a little bit better. But it can be very easy to disrupt it at times, that if your opponent finds 1 or 2 good pieces of removal, you're going to break up your package and then naturally fall behind. So I was really hyped to see Integrity Knights at 4-0 at round 5, and really happy they were still able to get a couple more wins to make their spot known on this overall breakdown. So with that out of the way, again, we're just going to quickly go through these because I'm a little sick of the time recording this, but I didn't want to wait any longer for these lists to get out there. So I will try to copy and paste all the deck list links in the comments below, so make sure to check those out. So, of course, our champion Ryza, as I mentioned, both on Twitter, awesome. Love to see Lancelot taking the entire thing down. Unfortunately, and by no means is this taking away their accomplishment, because obviously they're 8-0 up to that point. I got to see it firsthand that the Toshiro player unfortunately braked, which it hurts, right? And we've seen this both times at Worlds now in JP, and I know that this is why we changed to best of 3. We know this is why we're getting the 2 energy costed cards. Go watch my Kenshin video if you don't know what I'm talking about. So, like, UA is actively making changes to make this better, but to have our first, like, very big 9-round regional, and then to see the finals firsthand, because I was able to run back to that side of the tournament hall, and then to see the Toshiro player, who was on stream earlier, mind you, just unfortunately brick, and there was like a triple Toshiro play, but unfortunately, as we all know, if you spend the first 3 turns not getting to do anything, you're going to be too far behind at that point, because there's just not hands that you can sculpt to catch back up. Now, all that aside, I do again want to stress the fact of why Lancelot is now making this resurgence. In case you missed the Code Gas video, it's all about the Glaucaster into the Nunnally play, which saves your energy line and making sure that you're not losing any tempo to try to go into your 6 and 8 cost Lancelots. We got a raid that can just so perfectly bring this entire deck together with no real downside, right? And we got an additional filter card with the 0 drop. Now, there are still some flex spots in this. If you really wanted to, you could run a couple of these searchers just to increase that consistency. But overall, because you have the 0 drop, and at least gets you that extra filter. And of course, we have the other Suzaku, which is just going to draw us a card on play, the color trigger. I think you're fine to draw enough cards that way. So again, huge shout out to Ryza here for winning the 9-round. 9-0 is insane for a big regional, the biggest yet that we've had in North America, which is also really, really cool. And I would definitely expect to see a lot more Lancelot in the near future. Moving on from there, we have Mustang, or, don't call it the Mustang, call it the Ryza deck, whichever one you want to go with. But Mustang continues to show up, continues to be, honestly, I got to just concede the idea that people just love Full Metal Alchemist, right? Like, I think this is a fine deck. I definitely don't think it was as good as it was shown in Gen Con. And spoiler, it did fall off considerably in this regional, just looking at the results. So I think we're starting to see now more of the balance out of where Mustang is supposed to be. But at the same time, it's probably the most, favorite deck of the community, at least right now. Again, it is good, but I think there's definitely a popularity factor here. Putting everything on the line, I will 100% feel that Lancelot overall is a better deck than Mustang. That might be a hot take, be my guess, but there was less Lancelot being played at the tournament compared to Mustang. So this is your very low to the ground, aggressive style of deck with some extra removal just to make sure you're clearing the way. And of course, why not have the Edward in there as well? That gets us the extra attack when we really need it. But this is absolutely a deck that is going to require you to find the right pieces at the right time. But when you line up the Ryza and Mustang plays together and you get that BP reduction without having to overcommit a bunch of cards, you're blowing stuff up, you're getting double 4K attackers, this deck can be very aggressive in what it wants to be doing. And going back to Gen Con, and still a matchup I have not personally been able to play, but a lot of people have said that this beats up on the Squad Zero deck, which, spoiler, is still a very popular deck and was one of the most popular decks in the tournament. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mustang continues to just prey on that matchup and then has a few other good matchups in the meta overall that allows it to continue to perform very, very well in the North American meta. So again, in second place, we had Zanrio. Congrats with the Mustang. And again, congrats all the top 8 just being super diverse. So speaking of Toshiro, Jesse unfortunately lost at that 8-0 marker, dropping down to 4th. But, you love to see Toshiro coming up, and we got to see both on stream, so you can go back and watch the stream match, and we got to see, as I was watching his game and trying to come back from, Toshiro is still such a good card. Don't get me wrong, the Kenpachi package that we ended up getting in Volume 2 is still very good. It's a very nice card to have impact. It's very sticky, and all that stuff is really good. But as more and more decks try to rely on that, as long as it's active, generate an extra AP card, being able to freeze your opponent's backline is insanely strong right now in the meta, right? As we are seeing with the Kenshin deck as another good example, having that energy line removal and or disruption is super, super important. And as another deck that we're going to talk about later, spoiler, Toto, right, that we are now in a position where you have to be very careful about what you're putting in your energy line and how you're building your decks, because if you are lining up the double energy producers that have to remain active, and we're going to see more of the tap down or energy line, removal style of stuff with Kenshin, it's going to be very difficult to keep those cards and get the most value out of them, where just maybe a 3 energy, double energy providing card is going to be a little bit better. So very curious to see how this lines up in the future. Huge shout out again to Jesse. Very, very, very well fought battle up until the very end. Loved getting to watch their game on stream because it was Toshiro versus Nanami for those that missed it. And it was just such a cool matchup to see two very specific decks interact in a way that we just don't normally get to see in Union Arena. And honestly, it was just a treat to cast because there were so many niche moments that normally wouldn't come up in any other matchup. They're like, oh wait, but if he has this card, he can tap down the Gojo. It's going to mess up the play because he won't have this in his energy line. It was just super cool to watch two different decks go at it like this. And then the Nanami also having, playback with the resting effect, but then Jesse found it was just a great match. That's what I love. When we get good games like that for Union Arena, it's so much fun to cast them and get to see the different lines that players try to take to climb out of that match and put themselves in a winning position. So shout again to Jesse in our 4th place. Now, again, all about the energy line disruption that I was just talking about. In 5th, we have Wheelsing with the Toto deck. And this is all about that boogie woogie, baby, and making sure that we're disrupting their energy line as much as possible. And with Lancelot picking up in the meta as we might expect, having a deck like this that can constantly disrupt or threaten to disrupt your opponent's energy line while also just having a good damage to threat when you really need it is just so insanely strong. And again, the special, the Boogie Woogie itself, just give you even more options for disrupting what your opponent wants to be doing. So this is, again, another one of those, need to get up to 5-6 energy. It's a little bit of a turn slower, more of like your mid-range style strategy in that regard. But then also got to give a shout out to the Ultimate Mechamaru, which just can blow something up as long as you combo it with Amuta from the either graveyard, because you have the Goodwill event to bring it back, or just naturally from hand going the color trigger into the raid fodder and blow something up for 4K. So again, as we think about decks that, and I'll try not to harp on this too much throughout the video, right? What just makes up a good Union Arena deck? Extra removal, a special that's not going to have some kind of weird condition on it, and Boogie Woogie, while can be problematic if you're playing just Volume 1, is a lot better in Volume 2, and then some type of consistency piece over the top end, and we do have that with the Iori, and also with the Goodwill event, just being able to get us more utility out of our sideline. So also shout out to the one of Miwa. Double attacking is just really cheeky if you can get a win that way, but overall I think this is a very standard list that we're going to continue to see do well in the format, as long as things like Lancelot are still a very big player. Moving into 6th, we have Tony with the Renji Rush style, and not a lot needs to be said about this list. You slam 4Ks on the board, throw stuff at your opponent, and hope they don't have a special at the right time, right? This is all about not playing Union Arena in so many words, because you don't care about the raid effects most of the time. You just want to slam 4K bodies and be as aggressive as possible. Now, there are times where you will want to use the Renji raid for the 3K removal in case your opponent is trying to set up a blocker for something else that's smaller on the board, but generally speaking, you're going to want to try to just go toe-to-toe with your opponent for 4Ks, and things like the UG bouncer can be really good to reset their raid while you're still getting a 4K attack in and putting them a turn behind. So that is definitely something to keep in mind if you play this matchup a lot. But having the 3K double energy that goes up to 4K on attack, having all the extra, right, the 16 4K attackers, it's really just about establishing that board as early as possible, trying to put your opponent on the back foot, and just, if you really need it at the end, going into the raid Ichigo to get impact and get that last point of life. So shout out to 6th place Tony there. In 7th, we have Green One Punch Man with Specs. And this is a exciting one because it is, something that hasn't really popped up a lot lately, but, the real MVP of the deck, we got to give it up for King, right? Getting to produce the extra energy and act as removal is super important. And we do have the 1-drop King, which provides us a tutor when we really need it, or searcher, I should say. So there's a lot of ways to get up into that energy requirement that we really like. But the other thing I'll note here is that Silverfang, at least when I was getting the chance, I haven't played this deck in a while now, but Silverfang just being a 4,500 and giving you the extra filtering does so much for you when a lot of the field is 4K, that if they don't have the special, the exact turn that you line up with Silverfang, it's going to provide you a ton of value over the course of that match. So I really love Silverfang in this list and everything that it provides, but this is all about getting that ramp going into those big Saitamas, getting the triple impact to close out a game. And again, can be very difficult for your opponent because they're 10K bodies, right? You're not going to be able to block that in any world. And there's not even an active trigger can save you, in that situation. So really cool to see Green One Punch Man. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first time it finally popped up in a top 8 spot. But something that I've said for a while now is just a very fine deck to play, and was really happy to see it make it all the way to a X1 finish. Moving into 8th, we have Sukuna. And this is, if you've been following the game since JJK, you know everything about this boogeyman. Sukuna getting to draw the extra cards, try to find the Sukuna fingers, and eventually go into a 5K impact 1 to close out the game. Of course, the raid UG here is really important as well, just being a 4K that can bounce something back to your opponent's hand and kind of reset the board there. And of course, we have the one of Malevolent Shrine to give us all the extra modes, damage to, snipe, impact, go in the distance. If you find all of the Sukuna fingers, which again are just free draw off of the UG, Sukuna becomes an absolute scary boss monster finisher to close out the game. So definitely one that I would expect to see a lot more of in the future just because it is so good at what it wants to be doing. And while I'm a little bit biased, I love blue JJK, so I'm always happy to see more JJK decks pop up. Moving into 9th, so again, a ton of diversity just in the top 9 that we saw. We have Matt at 1. Y'all change your BTCG Plus names to whatever you want, but we have the yellow One Punch Man making a spot here, and this is more of the this one we've seen before with the Hellish Blizzard Splash, just for a little extra draw, but this is all about the heavy punching and removal Saitama and Genos package, which can then also replace itself, give you an extra blocker when you really need it, and just show off a very strong finish with the 5-2 Saitama, giving you the impact when you really need it, or just a 10k damage too is good enough for, being a very big threat and trying to close out a game. And a really important note here is the king is how you're able to restand it, so making it a good blocker as well. So there's a lot of key plays you can look forward to making in this deck, but again, I gotta give a lot of love to the Hellish Blizzard making an appearance in this list, just because the extra draw too I found to be so important for finding those right pieces at the right time, as well as the fact that you are discarding stuff for the Saitama effects, and that can give you the little bit of extra fuel that you need to build up that board plan. Moving into the 17th, now we have Squad Zero making its appearance, and this is definitely one that, well, again, was very popular in the tournament overall, and one that I would expect to be very popular as time goes on, because the Royal Palace just giving you so much free draw, the special that allows you to pitch cards and do even more filtering. Look, if there is a deck that is able to do the most filtering in this game, it should be Nanami because of how Nanami wants to work, but it's actually the Squad Zero deck. So if you are someone who just loves highly consistent decks with a lot of extra removal baked in, then definitely check out this Squad Zero list. And again, it's just so much fun to play too, because there's a few different iterations that you can, flex with it. The Ichibei, I think, is really fun just for, making sure you're calling the top of your deck and knowing what values you want to look for. The Oetsu is really good for giving you a 4K attacker when your opponent might not be expecting it. And then just Senjimaru, right, giving us the extra removal option when the Ichigo already can do so much for us as well. We are just constantly trying to remove cards from our opponent's side of the field and eventually get into that just chip damage turn after turn after turn. So huge shout out here to Long making it in the 17th. In 18th, we have Hansen with the Gawain deck, which is one that I know a lot of people probably shifted from Gawain to Lancelot in Volume 2, because technically this version of Gawain did not get anything in Volume 2. It got like the 2 AP build, which I know I didn't cover, but I don't like the 2 AP build anyways. I think this one is just strictly better, but Gawain with the MK2 being able to line up the BP shrinking plus extra removal can just create some insane power swing turns. But the real strength of this deck, as we've talked about time and time again, is if you get that Gawain out of life on that first attack and shrink their entire board by 1k so you can just block them out, look, a lot of times that will just end the game right there, because you just create such a big advantage on the swing back, assuming that your board is built up properly. So I love this deck because it has a lot of really cool interactions and plays that you can make based on the BP manipulation or just having extra removal. And again, with the Volume 2, I think there are maybe a couple cards that you could look into placing into this list just to freshen it up and try a few things. But I think the tried and true version that we see here is perfectly fine and could definitely run it back at an upcoming regional and do very well. In 19th, we have Real Life Oreo with the Nanami deck. So again, not biased at all, but I love seeing a Nanami deck whenever we can. And the challenging thing about the Nanami deck is, at the end of the day, is you have so many good raids that you want to be using. So we see a lot of like the 3-ofs in this case, but we also have to be keeping in mind that we want to filter through our deck as much as possible. So having the Maki to mill extra cards, having the Sukuna to draw 2, discard 1, right? We need to burn through our deck to get to 15 cards or less to really turn on the overtime for Nanami and go the distance. So this is definitely a fun one. If you want something that's a little bit different than the blue Sukuna deck and one that definitely wants to go much more into the late game to really get the value out of it, then definitely check out this list. In 21st, we have Hayden with the Asta list featuring Noel. And this is, again, just good old UA, right? Extra removal. You have a little bit of extra draw with the right packages that you can put in here. So this is just a good Union Arena deck, that we get to see time and time again. You are happy for the extra removal. You get the extra raid value for getting up to 4K or even 5K with the Noel in some cases. So if you are someone who just wants to play your favorite anime or title with extra removal, you can look forward to it because we're going to have a lot of decks like this in the future that are just good at what they do and have extra removal that makes them good enough to appear in the meta. Until we see a shift where like everything is suddenly 5Ks, right? All of these decks that remove a 4K, sorry, Genthru, you just don't make the cut here. If you remove a 4K body with your raid, you are in a very good spot. So shout out to Black Clover making it in. I know this is one that hasn't popped up all that recently yet, but love to see a 21st placement here from Hayden. And then 24th, we have Almazu with the Integrity Knights. And I think this might have been the same Goddess player, or what I thought to be a Goddess player, because I just saw yellow SAO cards as I was walking the floor. But I did see two different yellow SAO players, so I'm not sure if they were both Goddess or both Integrity Knights, or one was Integrity Knights and one was Goddess. But either way, when I was going around at the 4-0, I did see two different Sword Art Online yellow decks in the top two tables. So hopefully this is, the right one that we saw, then was able to claw it out all the way to the end. Unfortunately, right, this means they got like an X2 finish, but still very respectable start with the 4-0 in Integrity Knights. So this is all about, as I mentioned, building up your board, trying to get the right pieces online with Alice to get the extra removal, as long as you have Kirito and Yugo on the board for you to get the 4K, it's really going to go the distance and make sure that you're able to claw your way back into the match. This is definitely one where I wish that or I guess it's Yu-Gi-Oh, right? As how you pronounce it. The Yu-Gi-Oh was a little bit better of his raid itself. It's really, again, all about the Alice just being a 4K, remove a 4K with the right setup. The Nullify Impact is kind of cute and the other stuff that Yu-Gi-Oh does, but again, having the extra removal, having extra filtering with the 2 energy Yu-Gi-Oh is really important. So I love to see this deck. And if we get a volume, or well, I guess the volume 2 is coming up, right? We know the volume 2 is around the corner. I don't think that this gets anything in the volume 2, if I remember correctly. I think it was Goddess that gets support. But if we see a volume 3 Sword Art Online, I really want to see this deck get like a new raid target, because I think the core of it is pretty decent. We just need a little bit better of raids to really make this list shine through. And I think that's like an overall volume 2 comment that I'll make. Like, I want more good raids in my volume 2 for the non-new, or not the new color, right? And that could definitely help out a lot of these older Union Arena decks. So with that, we have our last list to cover is the Hellish Blizzard, the 2 yellow decks coming here at the end. And what I really love about this list in particular is when we think about combo decks in Union Arena, there is nothing like Hellish Blizzard. This is a totally unique deck that just does not operate like anything else currently. And that's why I'm always going to root for this, because if you put in the time and you know the sequencing and you're able to line up like the multiple discards and looping back event cards style of turns to have like a double removal into a final into double raid and do all that crazy stuff, it's going to feel crazy strong. Unfortunately, it does take a lot of work to like know the ins and outs of it. And again, at sometimes, because you are running such a event heavy style of list, there will be games where like, okay, cool, I saw all of my events, but I saw none of my terrible tornadoes somehow, right? Like, this is a deck that you need the extra action point turn after turn. So unfortunately, Terrible Tornado does just have like a Thunder Rod on it that as soon as you play it, your opponent's gonna be like, if I can remove that this turn, I will most likely, sequence my turn in a completely different way to kill that Terrible Tornado because it is so strong, and then do what I want to do. Because ultimately, if you disrupt the Terrible Tornado, how much your opponent has access to on their following turn gets severely crippled by comparison. But if you are someone who doesn't mind a little bit of glass cannon combos and, another deck that can set up its entire deck, and if you know how to stack your effects correctly, then Hellish Blizzard is not only a very fun deck to play, but clearly with a X2 finish can do pretty good here as well. So shout out to Marvin for the list. And that was a lot to go through, but really quickly, that was a breakdown of the 14 different archetypes. That is insane to say. 14 different decks that made top 32 at the Dallas Regional. Definitely let me know your thoughts below. Which is your favorite? And again, I'll try to include all the links down below for the different placements and BTCG Plus pairings, so you can check out all the other lists as well. But until next time, my friends, again, I try to get through this. I am a little sick, so it might be a little bit before I can get to the Hunter x Hunter video and stuff like that. I have to do the unboxing video for Hunter x Hunter still, and I've just been trying to catch up from getting back from Dallas. But at the end, I just want to say thank you so much to all the Union Arena players who came out, showed up in Dallas, and let Bandai know that we want more support for this game. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to take. Having people show up and respond to the surveys is how we get more support for Union Arena in the future. So I hope that people will continue to play, have fun with it, and most importantly, because for me, I just love this game, and I love watching a game come together where everybody can play their own favorite title and clearly do well with it based on the results that we have here. So huge shout out again to the top 8 having 7 or 6 different decks that we saw overall. And this was just a blast to host and cover and all that good stuff. So until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.